And for me, and for technologists, a non-binary vision of technology is understanding the fact that there is not the same brain, mental, or talent pattern. So in the case, if we try to build a binary vision of thing like right or wrong, smart or not smart, talented or not talented, black or white, we always fail.
Bullying is something all autistic people are just too familiar with. It's sort of part of daily life, I guess. Like, what's worse is that I feel like I spend a huge amount of time learning how to cope with the environment, but it's just so out of sync with my abilities and challenges.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Teens in AI podcast. Today I talk to the incredible Yonah Welker about AI and neurodiversity, how one empowers the other. They were also kind enough to share their career and their advice for young adults also interested in tech and AI. I was also lucky enough to talk to Fahim, a young boy who's currently in school and hopes to enter the world of tech and AI one day to empower other people. He was also kind enough to share his experiences and his perspectives as a young adult with autism. Can we start by maybe you telling me a bit about yourself, your career, some of the amazing work you're doing at the moment?
Yes. I spent almost all of my life in technology, but my current mission and my current work is primarily dedicated to what I call algorithmic diversity and inclusive vision of technology. I try to bring it to the mainstream, to the classrooms, workplaces, and so on. At the same time, I'm involved in research. I'm working on the foundation dedicated to the future of diversity, ability, and I'm still working on it. And at the same time, I'm involved in many projects, mostly open source or collaborative projects related to ethics.
I'm Fahim Rahman, I am 15 years old and I really just love computer science and AI. In the future, I just want to have a career that allows me to help people and change the world.
Thank you, Yonah and Fahim. That was really interesting. And Yonah, when I looked at your work, I found that you use the phrase, the future of tech is non-binary, quite a lot. Can you elaborate on what that actually means and how we can achieve a future that looks like this?
First of all, my work is really reflection of my own journey. And at some point of my life, I was forced to jump to building my own learning ecosystem due to health issues. So over time, I realized that institution and technology we have, it maybe fits some kind of a majority, but even this actually not true. But it doesn't fit many of people depending on health conditions, gender, race, and so on. So there are many underrepresented groups. And for me, and for technologists, a non-binary vision of technology is understanding the fact that there is not the same brain, mental, or talent pattern. So in the case, if we try to build a binary vision of thing like right or wrong, smart or not smart, talented or not talented, black or white, we always fail because we have some kind of an extremity of understanding things. But in most cases, we deal with a spectrum of shades, colors, criteria, and we should be very flexible no matter we are working on educational technology, adaptive learning, well-being startup, and so on.
It's really interesting. And I want to pick up on something that you've already touched on about the practicalities of getting to a stage where we no longer require people to fit certain requirements, but we create technology for them. What are the more practical steps to get to achieve this? How can we bring this idea and this application really into the mainstream of technology development?
Yes, it's a very good question. Typically, when I talk about democratization and actual practical interpolation of these good words and this mission to virality, I mentioned at least 5 steps. First is a problem of representation. Just maybe a few years ago, we started to care about women in technology. Until today, only 2%, 2.7% of venture capital gone to women. And we try to not solve, but at least become better, because we still need to make a lot of efforts. Afterward, we become more active in terms of racial equality and equity. We need the same efforts in terms of neurodiversity, disability, different kind of mental health conditions, and different type of ability diversity in order to have a very equal and dispersed type of presentation in technology in order to be smarter about how we design products. Second level is inclusive design. Initially, drivers of inclusive design were companies like Microsoft or Google, and personalities like Cat Holmes, who pushed big companies create a design then one fits one, or one fits one group. So more companies became interested in accessibility problem. But now we're able to go further, talking about inclusive technology and creating niche technologies like neurodiverse platforms, adaptive learning, and so on. Third problem and third action is a venture capital, is what I mentioned, is a creating niche venture funds focused on particular problems like neurodiversity, mental health, autism, dyslexia, disability, physical disability, multiple sclerosis. So different kind of expertise we need that should be aligned with money, community, doctors, or experts in order to provide not just money, but smart money, and help products actually grow and help people in real life. The next level is a collaborative data, is using decentralization. Unfortunately, we're not able to solve a particular problem related to brain, neuroscience without significant amount of a verified data. It's like a Parkinson or Alzheimer. We need a lot of collaborative efforts. So decentralized platforms dedicated to open care, brain diversity, neurodiversity, it's a must in order to solve it. And actually, there are some new projects. I will announce it very soon, but actually dedicated to this mission. And finally, is it ethics? And I mean, not only AI and data ethics, but ethics in general. I mean, we have a lot of ethics related to data privacy, but sometimes we just lack of a basic social responsibility on the entrepreneurial level. Before our talk, you mentioned Social Dilemma movie, and it's actually about it. I mean, they mentioned like, who is the villain? Who is this bad person who turned the social networks into the weapon of manipulation? No, it's not about villain. It's about lack of responsibility. People just didn't care. People just never thought about what will happen if I will act in this way. We actually a lack of ethical rules and education and knowledge across both technology and educational institution in general.
That's so interesting. And I want to shift the focus slightly towards the interaction between neurodiverse individuals and tech. What are currently some of the shortcomings and the challenges presented by current and tech AI in supporting positive interactions with neurodiverse individuals, and what fundamentally needs to change?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. First of all, typically when people ask me about neurodiversity and interaction of neurodiversity in technology, I tend to say it's not about fairness. It's actually about significant potential of how we're able to impact and influence our economics. And here I typically share my own experience in terms of the interaction with music. Since I'm a neurodiverse person, at some point I became really passionate about music, but at the same time, I was not able to use musical symbols in order to learn. So I used my imagination and I started to create music. And at some point, I was able to even create neoclassic composition. However, initially it was completely impossible. And from technology in scientific perspective, neurodiversity has a significant potential impact economy because millions of talent are still underrepresented. 90% of people with autism not employed full time. So if we're able to put them in the economy, is a significant jump into the amount of talent, new products, new startups, new professionals. Second, there's an infinite exploration in terms of the mental health. Because, for instance, if we think about neurodiversity or autism from mental health perspective, though it's not mental health conditions, though by doctors and medical community, it put it in the same spectrum as a schizoid personality disorder and even schizophrenia. So there are many similarities in terms of the brain. If we're able to become smarter about neurodiversity, we are able to come up with a new exploration and mental health, drugs research, some solutions, apps, platforms for different kind of conditions, including even severe one like schizophrenia. And finally is art. It's what I mentioned. Just recently, I've shared in my LinkedIn example with women who used her brain in order to manipulate and use a synthesizer. And there are many ideas how we could reimagine art, creativity, education, using some lessons from neurodiversity. So it's about positive ones. But in terms of dangerous things, for sure, there are some limitations, and it is about social responsibility again. If you remember Theranos, it was a huge bubble in Silicon Valley. It was drug tester, but it didn't work. So if we will introduce neurodiverse technology, which actually doesn't work, just as a big promise, is pretty bad.
We asked for him the same question about some of the challenges and the shortcomings that he found interacting with social media as a young person with autism.
The content just posted on social media on autistic people, it's just so insensitive and really stigmatizes symptoms associated with autism. For example, there is this TikTok challenge that if you have crazy eyes and this sort of sinister evil smile, it means you're autistic, and actual people really record the interactions to this audio, and that is just like degrading autistic people. And it's like the stereotype as like the mental and deranged human beings. And us autistic people, we're not. The TikTok algorithm pushed these types of videos on to me, and through my hashtag for you page. It's just disgusting. And I don't even use TikTok that much. And I just got that. I was just so disappointed.
Thank you both for that insight, and it's really eye-opening to hear about some of those challenges. I wanted to ask you, how can you see technology in the future being used to actually empower neurodiverse individuals and make parts of their day-to-day routine and life easier?
Typically, I tend put four types of such technology. First is research, and it's mostly startups related to drug research. So it's about drugs related to dopamine and sometimes MDMA. So is a first level. Second level is closer to my work, is adaptation, is adaptive learning like social robots for kids with autism, is a reading training like platforms related to dyslexia. For instance, currently in Europe, I mentor startup focus on AI training and eye tracking in order to help you to deal with the learning of writing. And finally, is the emotional training. One of the guests on my podcast was a person from Harvard. He created smart glasses, would help kids with autism better understand emotions of mother, father, families, and build a more long-lasting relationships and become more stable in regular life. The next thing is the environment. is a safe and adaptive communication and safe and adaptive creation environments. We're at platforms. I don't remember particular startups names, but for our platforms would help parents and kids communicate within safe environments of a similar neurodiverse kids, online or offline. So it's a kind of a creative zone for people with, for instance, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and so on. And finally, there are many platforms focused on mental health. It's a VR for a basic meditation or well-being, different kind of a headsets. But for me, if you ask me what my favorite technology is, basically robotics and VR, because robotics help to adapt the learning pace, and VR help you to work with your imagination. And specifically for neurodiverse individuals, imagination is a kind of a second personality, or is a big part of the internal world will help them to better understand external world. For instance, me personally, I spend a significant amount of time just thinking inside of my head, creating vision of something. And VR is a very good tool in order to work with internal environment and then interpolate it to the external environment.
Another thing that you mentioned a couple questions back about this intersection of tech and art. So can you elaborate a bit on this and the ways in which tech can be used in intersections with art to really empower neurodiverse people and people with different abilities and create some really cool and new different ideas of art and creativity?
Along with my technology career, I spent a significant amount of time working in music as an art producer and creator over hundreds of different musical tracks, experimenting. That's how music and audio is able to affect your brain. Typically, we have 5 senses, and our vision side and our ability to hear, smell, or touch thing is one of our key senses. And using the art or a creative technology around it help us to influence particular neuromédiators in our brain. For instance, I mentor a startup related to colorful rooms. One of my colleagues works with the audio audio drugs in terms of how we're able to affect serotonin and dopamine, and at the same time we're able to create a particular type of music videos in order to put them into the technology. And even if we're talking about startups, I just mentioned before, many of these startups try to use the creativity and art as a part of these products. For instance, if we're talking about VR, they already include some kind of a movies or a visual sense scenarios or stories. So part of these teams are storytellers, and they work with neuroscientists in order to create a picture which is engaging, but at the same time, it communicate with your brain on a particular level, in particular manner, in order to increase particular hormones in your brain in order to be more efficient, for instance, in communication. One of my challenges in my life was an issue with communication and ability to go from my internal feeling to external one in order to be more socially efficient. So was how it typically worked. But I would say we're just in the beginning of this movement, because we still have many regulation on policy level, is first level. Second level, we still have a disconnection between technologists and creators. There are creators who are technologists themselves. So we create a VR or a smart glasses or something like that, which are really driven by some kind of art. But we still lack of an active collaboration of artists and creators internally. I've been involved with many accelerators and incubators of startups, and I almost never seen such type of collaboration. And by the way, it's a really good idea because just a few years ago, we started to actively implement idea of the social scientists and ethical professionals in the residence. And now we should think about creative and art professionals as a significant part about how we're able to involve and engage neurodiverse individuals, people with mental health issues, and healthy ones for sure.
I have two final questions before I finish with some wrap-up ones. And the first one is, we've seen a lot of positive change in the workplace over the last decade in fighting against gender and racial discrimination. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we've definitely seen some positive movement. Can the same be said for discrimination against intellectual differences and disabilities and challenges?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. First of all, I believe we just in the beginning of our movement, and I strongly believe, though we have so many things are said across conferences, across different programs, neurodiverse people are still underrepresented. People with mental health issues are still stigmatized. Over the recent years, we had an opportunity to see how we make digital health some kind of a mainstream. So people who present a majority are able to get a pretty accessible and sometimes even free solution for digital health, digital well-being as an application in your mobile phone. But if we're talking about bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoid personality disorder, or autism, with people still lack a solution. I've talked with many manufacturers and creators of social robots, of smart glasses. They spend like 10 years, like a whole decade, in order to improve technology. But even these people believe that they just in the beginning of the exploration of something which will actually help these people is a first level. Second level, we only in the beginning of the actual attention from venture capital and investors. So just now, investors started to actually invest money into inclusive technology. So both on the technology level, on the personal level, on a professional level, neurodiverse people or people with mental health issues are still significantly discriminated. And many things should be done both in the US, Europe, UK. Maybe 5 or 10 years is a minimum amount of time we need in order to make an actual shift in this direction.
I again asked for him the same question about the sorts of challenges that he encountered in his day-to-day life, and more specifically school.
School is challenging. Students and even teachers, they don't understand me. Bullying is something all autistic people are just too familiar with. It's sort of part of daily life, I guess. Like, what's worse is that I feel like I spend a huge amount of time learning how to cope with the environment, but it's just so out of sync with my abilities and challenges. I know all autistic people can understand this and relate to it.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, based on that, what advice and what resources or maybe entry points can you recommend to some of our neurodiverse young listeners who are interested in the world of tech and AI and are looking for maybe some resources or some entry points or just some words of wisdom?
One of the key lessons I've learned in my life is that there is no normality. So it just doesn't make sense try to fit. Just do what you love. Second, experiment to explore yourself. One of my peers, her name is Cindy Wu, she was a creator of a platform that helped to democratize science. And she said like science, it's not something that requires funding. Science is a genuine and natural ability of everyone. So it's just ability to create an experiment. Experiment with something, record your ideas and your exploration and make some conclusions. So the second thing is try to experiment with what works for you and what doesn't work for you. For instance, for me, it was an exploration about better learning through writing and repeating. At the same time, I'm not really efficient through learning through listening. At the same time, I've learned that I work better in smaller group or when I work as a one person. So it's a better way for me. So we should come up with their own approach. Second, create your own vision of a world. Until today, for instance, in my life, I face the situation which you're not able to be entrepreneur if you're not able to visit different conferences, different places. But it was wrong. Actually, currently, we're able to work completely remotely. And I start to push ecosystem even before. I said, I see ecosystems like a completely decentralized thing. So let's work remotely. And I create my own routine, my own vision of world of education, of learning. And I just try to keep this model for myself. So just try to come up with your own vision of the world or your community or your ecosystem that is relevant for you and that make you more fascinated about work. So you could work every day and keep this routine. Then come up with your mission. I believe people always struggle to grow because we try to achieve particular title or occupation, but sometimes it's just not for you. And just forget about it. Come up with your own mission. For instance, I try to come up, my mission is pushing algorithmic diversity through technology, art, creativity. So I use different things which are relevant to me in order to bring this mission. And it makes my life funny, interesting, engaging. Maybe I will never be able to achieve particular titles, but I will able to achieve my mission and is much better in terms of my dopamine in my brain. And finally, build your own like-minded community. When I was younger, I was extremely lonely, and it was a source of a great depression. And over my technology journey, I try to connect with people who are relevant to me, who maybe a bit different mission, but who struggle or face similar challenges. And we try to synergize each other. And currently, I have peers around the world, and we share different experiences. We exchange our exploration, and it actually recharged my batteries and helped me to find co-creators, co-mentors, co-actors, and we created so much stuff in recent years together, even without funding. So actually, most of the stuff I've created, it was driven by my community, by my peers, and they actually a source of joy and energy I have on the day-to-day routine. So it's a kind of my advice.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Teens in AI podcast, and thank you to Yonah and Fahim for coming and talking to me today. Tune in next week as we talk to Professor Mitya Doyle about 5G and the future impacts, benefits, and ethical considerations.